If you aren't a search firm and you're not fractional HR people and you're not a payroll service, what the heck does the Metiss Group do? Well, let me tell you about some of the things that really differentiate us from other service offerings that you can find out there. First, when it comes to the Metiss Group as a whole, we consider ourselves behavior experts at work. By that I mean we really understand humans in the workplace. Not so great at the home place and some of the other stuff, but in the workplace we can help you figure it out. That means we'll help you put in processes around the people part of the business to give you some more predictable results. So it doesn't feel like rolling the dice every time you're making a hire or hoping this person can lead after you promote them. So let's explore a little bit further. We are industry agnostic. For as many industries as I think we have figured out, another one comes along we could have never imagined. We have one organization that researches and manufactures drugs that treat obscure forms of cancer. We have another company that, believe it or not, has a patented process for humanely capturing and relocating birds from places they're not supposed to be. Who even knew that was an industry? So people are people. They tend to present themselves in weird and exhilarating ways in all kinds of work environments, so it doesn't really matter what the industry is. We work best with organizations who see talent as an investment, not as an expense. So they should expect that for every dollar they're investing in someone's development or in putting some talent processes in place, they're going to get a multiple back in their return on investment. We also appreciate the fact that there are tons of assessments out there and we are not an assessment house. We believe with our behavior expertise, we can seek the right type of assessments for certain situations. And most of the time, we will be using multiple sciences because people are more than one-dimensional. Most of the assessments out there are just behavior-based assessments, which is great, but I've never seen an organization have a challenge because this person's an extrovert and this person's an introvert. It's actually based on some other things. It may be acted out based on those behaviors, but it's based on some other things that cause the friction. There's also different things that will make someone who's an introvert or an extrovert excel in a leadership role. In the old days when we only had behavior-based assessments, we used to think you had to have an extroverted component to your personality in order to be able to lead well. That didn't really explain the Derek Jeters or the Bill Gates of the world, who were extraordinary leaders even though they were relatively introverts. The other thing that really differentiates us is that you are never alone when you're with us. Every one of our components presents you with a guide who will hold your hand through the entire process on which you've embarked. So you never have to feel like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going this alone, this is the first time I've done something, or I'm trying something new with this technique. You will always have one of our senior advisors as your trusted guide on your journey for being an extraordinary leader. The other thing that's interesting is many of our clients tell us what in their mind differentiates us from other folks they engage with is that we care about their business as if it were their own. So when we are with them as a partner, as a guide, they know that we have their best interest in mind. There's typically out the door pricing that they've agreed on in the past. So when one of us is giving some particular advice or guidance for you in your next steps, it's not because it has any other motivation or monetary inclination for us. It's really because we want to do what's best for you and your organization. So now let's take a look at the Leadership Academy. In the Leadership Academy, the first thing to understand about leadership is it's the number one reason people quit their jobs. Forget what they tell you in their exit interviews. Oh, I got an offer I just couldn't refuse. I wasn't even looking. Sure, But privately, when they answer third-party surveys, over 97% of the time it comes back that their boss is the number one reason that they quit. So if you're trying to work on retention or even attraction strategies, the number one thing you can do isn't more PTO, it's not a bigger 401k, it's not even more bring your fish to work days. It's really about developing the leaders for those people you can't afford to lose. For all leaders who are participants in any of our leadership development programs, everything starts with a self-discovery. There's a suite of assessments they're going to take to get a feel for where they are right now. Where are some of the things they're already strong and we need to make sure we leverage those? Where are some opportunities for growth? Or where might be some potential detriments that could be weighing them down that we need to at least not make a negative? And then once we have the self-discovery completed, we can help that individual create an individual development plan. In that individual development plan, there will be measurable and time-based goals. So as an example, if you want to get better at delegation, that sounds all well and good, but how will we know? Well, with delegation, maybe your measurable time-based goal is that you want to be able to delegate 3 projects by the end of the year that are delivered on time, on budget, without micromanaging. That gives us something to shoot for. And so below that, we can have action items that are measurable and time-based. First, I have to decide what are the 3 projects I want to delegate by a certain date. To whom should I delegate those 3 projects by a certain date? What model are we going to use for delegating and teach that to those people to whom I'm going to delegate those projects? So when the participant supervisor is saying, how are you coming on your development plan? They should actually see completion dates on some of these sub-goals that leads them to believe they're making progress on the overall goal. Once we get past the self-discovery, everything is important to make it sticky. We've all spent money on training programs and training sessions that we send someone to, and everybody comes back fired up, but nothing sticks and nothing changes. In order to make sure this learning is sticky, we have adopted the 70-20-10 model. That means only 10% of the time involves structured learning, whether that's in a workshop that's very interactive, which increases some stickiness, or an instructional video. We make sure that there is structure around the learning. Then 70% of the time, they gotta try it out. What works, what's not working, and then 20% of the time they're getting feedback on how clunky that was or which pieces didn't work, some additional resources to shore it up, or some tweaks on how they were implementing certain techniques to make sure that the learning is sticky, and then that 70-20-10 becomes iterative. And the more they learn and the more they practice and the more they get coached and they learn and they practice, it really starts sticking. You're not gonna get that kind of learning out of a lunch and learn or a one-day program. It's important to look at the whole process if you're going to be investing that money. In many of our self-discovery programs, we include a 360-degree feedback tool. It's different for each situation, and some of our programs do require them. The 360s are really important to understand because we know that others judge us by our behaviors, but we judge ourselves by our intent. So if I did something that made someone upset and I say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't intend that, or I didn't mean that, they're still upset. Just because I didn't intend that doesn't mean I get to excuse my behavior. But if I have no idea what made them take offense, I can't fix it. So the 360 gives us a lens by which we can look at our behaviors and how they're perceived by others. So if there's a disconnect between how you intend to behave and how others are perceiving you, then you can make the changes to your behavior ever so slightly that allow you to be known to be the leader you've always wanted to be. Well, now let's take a look at where it all starts. Let's look at the hiring process coach to make sure you're getting superstars in the roles that you have. It's a lot easier to lead the superstars than it is to lead the duds. So if you really want to get superstars on board, we have to use a real process. And it's important to understand, even if you've used assessments in the past, or if you have multiple unstructured interviews that create what you're thinking is a process, those aren't processes. Those are steps within the process, but a process will follow the same line, and in theory should be like a funnel. So if you are putting every candidate all the way through every step of the process, even if you know they're a dud in the first step, that's just a waste of your time and effort. That's crazy. A good selection process should be like a funnel and should allow you to weed out the duds or even the not so bads until we can get to the superstars at a much finer point and a much fewer selection at the bottom. When we start with the hiring process coach, everything starts with creating the job scorecard using the stakeholders of the job. It is imperative to include the people who understand what it takes to do the job well, but more importantly, those people who are impacted if the job is done poorly. So let's think of a typical salesperson. If you have a sales role you're trying to define, of course the supervisor or VP of that department is going to want to have a say. Oftentimes CEOs like to have a say on the salesperson as well. We also know that somebody from finance always likes to have a say in whether or not sales is pulling their weight. Operations should certainly be included because they have to deliver whatever the sales guy just sold. Customer service might have to pick up the slack after the salesperson flies off to the next sale. And there could be other people throughout the organization who are impacted. Getting their input for what success really looks like in the job serves several purposes. One, it gives us much more clarity in the job. Two, it gets their buy-in from when this person comes on board. Because the last thing you want is somebody sitting back going, yeah, well, let's see if this guy works this time. You want to make sure everybody is fired up because they know what the person's being hired to do and they had a say in what that person's going to look like. So gathering the stakeholders is important. The job scorecard provides so much clarity on the job that if we know one of the primary reasons people are frustrated with their boss is that the job isn't what it was supposed to be and it didn't fit their needs and interests, then as soon as they submit a resume and you send them a copy of the job scorecard, they can weed themselves out. They might ghost you, they can go crickets, or they might be kind enough to say, oh gosh, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. Again, that's right at the top of the funnel, and people are allowed to opt out if it isn't what they thought it was going to be, or if they didn't expect to be held accountable. Once we have all of that done, then your team would be provided with the behavior-based interview questions that tie to the characteristics that would make someone successful in that role. So they're even using multiple sciences to define the avatar for what perfection looks like. Now, when you're using multiple sciences, nobody's going to match it perfectly. But when you know that your hiring team is using the questions tied to the characteristics everybody decided was critical, then you know that they're not going to be asking inane questions, that they're going to be working off of the questions that tie to the job, and they can be screening candidates out based on those characteristics before you even get to an assessment. So while our unique process will include that definition phase that involves everybody with two of our team members facilitating it, you'll also have your own senior advisor guiding you through the whole process. There will be instructional video for everybody on your hiring team or your HR person or the hiring manager to view for each step in the process, sometimes some samples, and access to your senior advisor who can help you customize and tweak each step for your organization and culture. This is important because when it comes to finding the person, we already said we're not a search firm, but most positions that are professional or leadership based are very LinkedIn friendly. LinkedIn's done a great job with their algorithms in trying to help you find something, but when we can help you create a job posting that describes more the person you're looking for and less about the job, the quality of the responses you get goes up exponentially. There are times where LinkedIn doesn't work as well, and you might need a search firm, especially if there's some bizarre hard skill requirements, or if it's geographically located in the middle of nowhere someplace and you want this person in person, not virtual. Then that means you're going to need to look for some expertise in the search world in order to help you find some of those candidates that are going to be a lot more rare. However, most organizations that do wind up using the Metiss Group with a search firm, and we've done it many times, find that our approach gives them kind of an insurance policy because ours comes with a guarantee through the first year if you're using the accountability system to make sure that it's the right person. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to know that one of the steps in our process is using a suite of multiple science assessments. We believe that using a single science assessment in the selection process is just negligent. If you had a really hurt arm and you went to the doctor and all he used was a thermometer, You'd think that was crazy. How can you tell if my arm's broken, if there's soft tissue damage? You don't know with just one diagnostic tool. You wouldn't expect the doctor to say, but I like using the thermometer because it's easy to read. There are some assessments that are really easy to read, but that doesn't make any sense for giving you more insight into a person. So we'll be there though with you, holding your hand, helping you interpret them, understanding the follow-up questions to ask, and the answers to listen for to make sure you're really bringing on that superstar. Then if you want to, and you're really dedicated to making sure you're setting this person up to be wildly successful, shorten that learning curve, have a great foundation of trust with their direct supervisor, then you really want to look at the accountability system. The accountability system is designed to make sure that a new hire or someone who's in a job that has changed in some way that they aren't accustomed and their supervisor are on the same page all the time. So it's great if a job has recently changed. It's great if there's a new person coming into the job. It's also great in a dynamic environment where there's suddenly a bunch of changes going on. Like you are making acquisitions left and right, or you are in turnover mode, or you're making an expansion or bringing on an ERP. And all of a sudden there's all kinds of things that are going on, and we need to make sure nothing slips through the cracks and there's no duplication of efforts. That's what this is all about. So the accountability system starts with looking at the job scorecard that you already built and making sure that that job scorecard is tailored for what needs to get done this next quarter. So we might make modifications to that job scorecard so that the person in the role knows exactly what they need to focus on the next 3 months, or if it's really dynamic, the next month, in order to really shorten the learning curve, accelerate success, what to not worry about now and what to get focused on immediately. That's what the accountability system is all about. So your senior advisor or guide will walk you through the process and guide you through updating that job scorecard. Then once a month for a year, that senior advisor will call the supervisor and say, how's everything going? And at first they're gonna say, this is great, we really did hire a superstar. Wonderful, but nobody's perfect. If you could wave a magic wand and change anything, what would you change? Well, it's not a big deal, but gosh, I wish Joe just wouldn't do this one thing the way he's doing. It would do something differently. The advisor will say, oh, okay, based on Joe's profile, this is how you should have that conversation with him. Now, let's say she calls Joe and says, how's everything going? This is the greatest job ever. Sure. But again, nobody's perfect, including your boss. So how are things going with Sue? Well, Sue's really, really cool, but I really wish she would call me Joseph and not Joe. Oh, okay. Here, based on Sue's profile, this is how you should have that conversation with her. And by doing it this way, they're making sure that anything is addressed before it becomes a big issue, that they're understanding the best ways to communicate with each other. So at no time does our senior advisor work as the intermediary. They are simply there to facilitate the right conversations, the right meeting rhythms, and make sure these things happen every month. Every quarter, the senior advisor will sit down with Sue and Joe, or whoever your supervisor and direct report are, and make sure that job scorecard is updated again for this next time period. And they keep doing this through the whole year to make sure that this person is on a track for extraordinary performance. All of this starts with the premise that people cannot take accountability for work that they didn't know was their responsibility to begin with, and their mind reading skills just aren't nearly as strong as you think. And the clarity you think you're providing isn't quite as strong as you think either. So the job scorecard brings that clarity for everybody. Then that document actually facilitates the conversation on performance. The other thing to consider is if you do have a poor performer. When someone's job is at risk, you should do those reviews at least once a month. And if they keep having their off track every time they go to that same couple of items, they're going to find their own exit. You're not going to have to worry about it, because if they know there's no chance they're going to fix it, they don't want to keep having these conversations long term. But superstars love getting feedback about how they're not just meeting, but exceeding these expectations, and they will continue to soar. Now you have your superstars on board, and it's time to develop them. Remember, if you aren't constantly developing and investing in the talent that you brought on board, their skills may atrophy over time, and their engagement in the organization may wane. And in order to keep that strong, especially for your superstars, you need to continue to invest. Let's look at the emotional intelligence journey first, because this can be used for either an individual contributor or somebody in a leadership role. And I know emotional intelligence or EQ sounds like something warm and fuzzy, but believe it or not, the exact tool we use is used by the U.S. Secret Service, several areas of the military, and state and federal law enforcement. Not exactly entities that we would all consider warm and fuzzy, maybe, but at the very least, they understand how their actions impact the emotions of others and how to take their own emotions into account as they're making decisions and they're moving through the business of their day. Emotional intelligence science has been around for quite a while, and the granddaddies of emotional intelligence have always focused on self-awareness, self-expression, awareness of others, and interpersonal skills, which are all great. But what we like about Stein and Beck, who wrote The EQ Edge, is they took those four, kind of wrapped them into three. So emotional intelligence, emotional expression, interpersonal skills includes the awareness of others and adapting to that personality. But then it also includes decision-making and stress tolerance. In today's day and age, I can't imagine not having those tools strengthened, since the media has created such an adversarial society of us versus them, and making all of this content around taking offense to anything anybody says and taking it out of context and giving you sound bites and all this kind of stuff. The emotional intelligence tools that we use actually help you in developing better decision-making skills by improving your problem solving, working on that impulse control so you're not just jumping to the first conclusion, and reality testing, which is taking a step back and looking at the context of things. What other things has this person said in the past? What have their actions been? Is the one thing I took offense to consistent with everything else I know about this person? And that helps you put some things into account. Stress tolerance is also really important, and believe it or not, optimism is a key component of stress tolerance. For this, we use a 360 tool that is amazing. And in many cases, but certainly in emotional intelligence, this is more critical than you might expect. Most of the emotional intelligence tools out there will only focus on self-reported data. So if I think my emotional intelligence is really strong, why would I bother working on it? Well, it's one thing to look at how I feel about my emotional intelligence skills, but what about if I got input from my boss, my peers, my direct reports, maybe even friends and family, and see if the way I intend to behave is actually the way I'm being perceived? Because if not, and I want to change those perceptions, then I have the opportunity to do that. And if there are development plans that you've put in place to make sure that you are improving those decision-making skills, your awareness of others, some of these other things, we will guarantee, if you've signed up for the 6-month program, that you will see those measurable results before you're done with the 6 months. So let's go on to the Leadership Essentials Playbook. This is especially good and was designed for first-time leaders, people who are already in a leadership role. However, every time we talk to CEOs or COOs about this journey, we realize that many of them say, wait a minute, I know I'm bringing this on for these new supervisors, but I never got any of this leadership development. Do you think it'd help me too? Absolutely. So just because you've been leading for a long time doesn't mean you're fantastic at it. I know I've been playing golf for 30 or 40 years and I'm not ready for the pro tour. So it's important to continue working on those skills. At the very least, senior leaders can benefit from this so they don't disrupt the learnings that the new leaders are trying to implement. There are 8 leadership essentials that each participant will work on. These leadership essentials are techniques, actual techniques that are implemented that will truly accelerate the performance of direct reports. Because we realize for the leader, especially if it's a new person who used to be the independent contributor, giving 5 or 10% more yourself isn't nearly as important as if you can get 5 or 10% more productivity out of everybody else who reports to you. That's a better ROI for the organization. There are 2 choices with the Leadership Essentials Playbook. One, if you have 10 or more people in your organization that can all be assembled at the same time, there's often a benefit for having the group come together for 2 of the workshops within the 4 to 6 month program and actually have some shared experience around the structured learning. They will still have the self-discovery up front and the individual coaching all the way along that meets them where they're at personally in their leadership journey. But it allows some interactivity and shared experience in the cohort workshops. If you don't have that many people, or if you had a group that already went through it and you've hired another leader or 2, you want to benefit from the program, we have the Leadership Essentials Playbook personalized. And that is for individuals who, for 6 months, will start with the self-discovery. We'll even have assessments in both cases for their direct reports. So when you're giving them feedback, when you're working with their development, we can tailor the coaching to each of the direct reports with whom you're interacting. As you walk through the entire process, every month there will be some instructional videos, typically very short. I think the longest one might be 15 minutes. You'll still have the one-on-one coaching, and then that will lead you all the way through the 6 months. Again, you will have an individual development plan where there will be measurable and time-based goals, and you'll have some surveys at the beginning, the middle, and the end to make sure that your results are really being observed by your direct reports. And if not, we will guarantee that as well. Now, we've looked at what we can do for individual contributors, for first-time leaders, and leadership as a whole. But for senior leaders, we should really be looking at strategic leadership alignment. One of the things we love most is for an organization who seems to have mastered all the leadership basics and has a great strategic plan against which they're trying to perform. Making sure your leadership practices are aligned to that strategy becomes critical. If you're in hyper-growth mode, that requires different leadership skills than if you just got through with hyper-growth mode and now you need to take a step back and put some structure or processes and systems in place so you're not held together by bubblegum and Band-Aids. So we need to make sure that the leadership practices that the group is going to focus on are aligned to your strategy. In doing so, we can make sure there's consistency across departments. So if we're moving people from department to department, certainly it's critical in a matrixed organization. Because if you have someone with multiple supervisors and they're each leading in a different way, it's going to make them feel like a tennis ball in the middle of a tennis match getting banged back and forth. So we want to make sure that they have what they need and it's being delivered consistently from a leadership perspective. It can also be incredibly helpful for an organization who's going through a merger and an acquisition. I've never seen those mergers go awry because the books weren't aligned appropriately. There's plenty of due diligence around that. But it's usually because the culture isn't the same. The culture is in conflict with each other. And we know the fish stinks from the head. So if the culture isn't quite matching, it's often a reflection of the type of leadership. So if an organization who's been growing by acquisition brings on another organization that needed to be acquired, making sure they're all on the same path now that we're together, what are the leadership practices we're going to need to create this cohesion, to create the engagement, to make us one company moving forward. There may be very different leadership practices we need to employ. And when the leaders from both organizations that have now been conjoined can use the same leadership practices, everything becomes a whole lot easier for everybody throughout the entire organization. Finally, it's a great program to use for succession planning. When the executive team gets together and decides the 5 to 10 leadership practices they need moving forward to achieve their goal for the next 3 to 5 years, that's great, but sometimes a couple of levels down needs a subset of those skills. maybe not so strategic, not so innovative right at the middle level of management, and maybe at the frontline level of management. The last thing we need is innovation and strategy. We need you to follow the processes and systems that have been put in place. And so if someone has mastered the skills that were needed at the entry-level supervisor and now wants to start looking towards middle management, they can look at the differences that are aligned for that level management and start developing and practicing those so they're prepared once they get promoted instead of just throwing them in and hoping it works. Strategic leadership alignment has so many different purposes if an organization really needs to align themselves in order to achieve a strategic goal that shouldn't be that hard to get to. So we looked at everybody else throughout the organization. We can't forget the top dog or the second in command. So we call this the Visionary-Integrator Catalyst. We are operating system agnostic. However, when it comes to EOS, the relationship between the visionary and the integrator is completely different than a true CEO to COO or president and chief of staff. And the reason is, in this reporting structure, the visionary only has one direct report, and that's the integrator, and the integrator has everybody else. So when you are first deciding that you're going to bring in an integrator, or if you have to replace an integrator who was not a good fit, the rest of the leadership team is a little spooked. They either feel like they are getting demoted because why do I need somebody micromanaging me? Or the last one didn't work. Why do we think this one's going to work? I'm just going to go do an end around and start talking to the visionary directly. So our process is set up specifically to make sure everybody who used to report to the visionary is included as stakeholders. And we start with defining the visionary's future role first. We know the number one reason integrators fail is because of the visionary. Intellectually, it sounds like a great idea to bring somebody else in to handle all the day-to-day stuff. But emotionally, once that person arrives, and now I don't know, this is what I've always done with this organization, now what am I going to do? Where do I get my identity if I'm not doing all this stuff? And I know I said I was going to delegate all this stuff to you, but why don't you shadow me for a while, get to know the industry, the business? And I know I said everybody was going to report to you, but why don't you earn the trust of the team first, and then little by little we'll let that happen. And so by 12, 18 months, they feel like a substitute teacher, and this integrator is done. Now, if the visionary has crystal clear objectives on their job scorecard, what are they going to spend their time doing? What's going to get them fired up to be doing that and letting go of the other stuff? And if the rest of the team understands why the visionary needs to be focused in different directions and can't do it all, we get everybody's buy-in and everybody's support on this whole program. Once the visionary scorecard is built, we can then build the scorecard for the integrator because we know the stuff that the visionary has no intention of doing. And every visionary and integrator is different. So we need to make sure that we are clear about what the two roles are. So there's no duplication of efforts and there's nothing slipping between the cracks. Then we just follow the whole hiring process coach for getting the right integrator on board, and we follow the accountability system to make sure that this integrator and their visionary are yin and yang. They are just in perfect sync with each other and can help take the organization to new heights. We run on EOS, and while there are no official ties and there's no official partnership, we are part of the community we serve. We understand the benefits of running on EOS and the detriments of when we've strayed a little bit. So we understand what it's like to have a passion around what we do and wanting to accomplish our goals. While we are operating system agnostic, most of our stuff was designed intentionally to work hand in glove with EOS. It is never designed to conflict with or undermine any of the work that you're doing with EOS. In fact, it's all designed to help give you an exponential benefit when you're implementing EOS with your implementer or self-implementing, knowing that the people piece is really buttoned down and that you have the support you need to achieve all your goals. So as you can see with the Leadership Academy, this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. We know that every leader is in a different place in their journey, whether they're just starting out or they hit some speed bumps along the way, knowing they're going to have a guide with them along along the way, that they're going to choose the right program and that one can build on the other, all gives people confidence in the fact that it is a journey. It's not like a class, a destination. It is an ongoing journey. And how can I continue to evolve my leadership skills to be the best person I can be for all of my direct reports and your organization? That's the goal. You guys deserve all the things that you have in mind for your organization in the culture that you want. Let's make sure all of your leaders are aligned to get those results.